Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm your host, Jordan Jones. It's Monday morning, February 15th, here in West Lafayette, where we are in the midst of some serious snowfall on the night after a fantastic running of the Daytona 500. That's why I'm recording today on a Monday morning instead of the usual Sunday night. A week ago, Purdue just had one basketball game, a loss to Minnesota. Did not sit in the minds of anyone very well. We'll take a look back at that loss before previewing this week's action against Michigan State and Nebraska. And we'll close with some thoughts on the Big Ten and Purdue women's hoops for the first time all year. But, Minnesota, Purdue, a weird 5 p.m. tip-off. Even weirder for the Gopher fans in Central Time, 4 p.m. tip there. I enjoy games tipping off this early as a fan of basketball, but I don't like when it's my team. Just feels so weird when the game's over at 7 o'clock and you have the whole night ahead of you. Early on, Travion Williams kept Purdue in this game. 15 points in the first half on 7 of 11 from the field. He absolutely dominated Liam Robbins both times Purdue played Minnesota. And it was really good to see Williams succeed in the first half and have a big first half. So often this season, the story around Williams has been that he picked up 2 fouls in the first half, had to sit a lot, and then came out and had a big second half. This time up at the barn, Purdue was able to avoid that. And that was excellent. Seeing him take over in the first half is something that Purdue really wants to have happen a lot more than it has so far as we kind of go into this last month of the regular season. But outside of Williams, Purdue just 1 of 7 from three-point range in the first half. I was pretty optimistic seeing Purdue take a halftime lead despite just knocking down 1 3. Thought that was a good sign of how the second half would go. Unfortunately, that's where I was wrong. Purdue finished the game just 2 of 17 from long range. Brandon Newman, Mason Gillis, the 2 redshirt freshmen, each knocking down 1 3-pointer. But Purdue got nothing done from outside. They relied almost exclusively on Williams and Zach Edey to make plays. Travion Williams, 24 points, 10 rebounds. Zach Edey, 13 points, 5 of 6 at the free throw line. Really, really good free throw shooter is Zach Edey. It's been nice to see him, last 2 games, 8 for 8 against Northwestern, then 5 of 6 against Minnesota. 13 of 14 at the foul line is really, really good for a freshman big man, a big man in general, but especially a freshman big man. And Eric Hunter Jr. had his best offensive day in a while. 14 points, 6 of 8 shooting. He really did well with his mid-range jump shot. And that's an area of Eric Hunter's game that I don't think we have seen as much of this year. I think last year we really saw the development of that mid-range be one of the storylines around Eric Hunter for the season, who had a great sophomore year. This year, he's been great on defense, but he hasn't had the consistency on the offensive end. That was a really good game for him. And if this can be something Purdue can replicate, that's really big as we move into this final month, to have your most experienced guards playing well. Purdue could use that and get better from that very easily. But, Minnesota leads this game for 10 minutes. That was almost entirely in the first half. They took the lead for the first time in the second half with 14 seconds to go. Marcus Carr banks in a 3 from pretty far out. A complete shot of luck, but, they all count the same. Purdue had the ball 2 times after that. Travion Williams called for a travel. Gabe Kalsher makes 2 free throws to make it a 3-point game. A weird baseball pass with too much time left on the clock ended up working out okay. Purdue gets a out-of-bounds play from towards the corner on the sideline. Horrible spot to inbound the ball. Stefanovic gets the ball but has nothing open. Purdue falls 71-68, and it was a tough one. It's back-to-back road losses that really could have been wins for Purdue. It's similar to the Maryland loss in the sense that, it's a game where Purdue had so many chances to pull away and put the game away and couldn't do it. It is worth noting, Purdue won games at Michigan State and at Ohio State. Those are games Purdue probably loses 8 or 9 times out of 10. Things kind of have a funny way of evening out in sports, and this is probably an example of that. Purdue's had 3 close losses this year in Miami, Maryland, and Minnesota. 3 games that really probably should have won, but they probably shouldn't have won at Breslin Center and at Value City Arena. It's a tough loss. Anytime you have a 6-point lead at the under 4 timeout and don't win, it hurts. Minnesota was way better than they were the first time these two teams met in Mackey Arena. Marcus Carr was completely shut down the first time these two teams played. This time, 19 points. It took him 18 field goal attempts to get there, but 19 points regardless. Big-time plays down the stretch. The banked-in 3. Purdue played pretty good defense on that. It was a bank. What do you even say at that point? Gabe Kalsher, a really interesting, statistical anomaly there. 2 years ago, he was over a 40% three-point shooter. Now he's down to 22%. He goes 4 of 7 from deep, 16 points for Kalsher. Purdue wasn't trying to get him open looks. There's some players you'll let shoot. Gabe Kalsher's not one of those guys. Regardless, good day for him. Brandon Johnson goes 7 of 9 from the field, has 15 points. You don't expect that to happen, but very good day for him. Liam Robbins, still inefficient. I think you can look at Liam Robbins' 2 games against Purdue and feel very, very good about Travion Williams and Zach Edey and their ability to really control a pretty good big man in Liam Robbins. As a whole, though, the Gophers played with much more physicality than they did in Mackey Arena. We saw that they were much more physical on both sides of the ball, both inside and outside. They really got outmatched by Purdue's intensity the first time they played in Mackey Arena, and they were able to match that this time. There was a lot of conversation about officiating. We're to the point that's going to happen anytime Bo Borowski's on a game. When you're giving Purdue post touches every time, and that's really Purdue's only offense in the game, coming from the post, you're going to have a lot of contact. Matt Painter disagreed with some of the calls. He was fairly vocal about that, something he doesn't often do. But I don't usually criticize officials much. I officiate baseball myself, but Purdue shouldn't have been in a position where officials determine the outcome of this game. If you look at Purdue's guard play, outside of Eric Hunter, it wasn't good. Brandon Newman struggled, 5 points on 2 of 7 shooting. Jaden Ivey, 4 points on 1 of 8 from the field. He was 0 of 4 from 3. Sasha Stefanovic, scoreless. He's clearly still working back into a rhythm. These 3 guys can't all struggle on the same night. And it's certainly a rarity. It's not something that we've seen Purdue deal with a lot, where none of these guys play well, but you can't afford to have all 3 of those players struggle and have a bad game, especially against a team. Minnesota's by no means at the top of the Big Ten, but they're formidable. They're good enough that You can't have those issues against Minnesota. Final thought of this game, over half of Purdue's points came from the 5 spot. When half of your points come from one position, I can't think of a single time that's a good thing. It doesn't take anything away from Williams and Edey. They were fantastic, but you have to get more production from other spots on the floor. You can't have 37 of your 68 points come from the same position. Edey's been really good lately. Northwestern and Minnesota are certainly less physical in the post than some of the other teams in the league are, but he's played very well. Good to see him kind of responding after, he middled in some Big Ten games, still adjusting to the speed and physicality of it. But, Purdue with a tough loss. Moving on, tomorrow, Michigan State at Purdue, 7 p.m. tip-off on ESPN. It will be interesting to monitor Michigan State getting to Mackey Arena. As I look outside, it's still snowing. It is supposed to snow pretty much all day here. Forecasts are calling for 8 to 10 inches from last night to tomorrow morning. We'll see what goes on there. I am excited. The game's on ESPN. I would love to have Dan Dockich on the game. It was awesome to have Robbie Hummel last week for the Minnesota game. That is the downside. The BTN deal with Fox, having a lot of games on FS1, I don't always like the announcers as much as I do when Purdue gets guys like Dan Dockich and Robbie Hummel. But with Michigan State, Purdue won the first matchup 55-54. Big game for Trevion Williams, game-winning shot from the left block at the Breslin Center. Not your typical Michigan State team. They're really struggling, just 4-8 in Big Ten play, coming off a 30-point loss to Iowa. That was in the Breslin Center, something you just never see. Michigan State does not lose by 30 at home. This year, they do. Indiana product Aaron Henry is their leading scorer, but he's only shooting 28% from deep. Joey Hauser has not been the impact transfer he's needed to be for this group. We did see the Spartans were successful against Purdue when they really ratcheted up the pressure on Purdue's guards, especially out on the perimeter, pressuring Purdue's guards 30 feet away from the basket. They weren't ready for that in the first half. They handled it better in the second half, and they have gotten better at handling pressure within the past month. But I'll be interested to see as the game goes on. Michigan State's not going to be afraid to pressure Purdue, and we've seen Purdue struggle against Northwestern, against Penn State, at handling that cranked up pressure, especially in a full court situation. Could be a big test for Purdue in that area, but Purdue should be able to flip the floor and win the battle at the 5 spot again. Williams was fantastic up there. Michigan State has really struggled to replace Xavier Tillman, and it's interesting to see some of the impact of the pandemic. Michigan State's 2 biggest weaknesses are at the 1 spot and the 5 spot. Last year, that was Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman, 2 guys who were really good at Michigan State for multiple years. I think the lack of summer practice really hurt them trying to replace those two key players. Winston, all Big Ten guy. Xavier Tillman, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year. Those are really hard guys to lose. Purdue wants to defend its home court. It has a great shot at a season sweep against Michigan State, a program that rarely gets swept. That would be incredible stuff if Purdue can do it. And then they go to Nebraska, a 5:30 tip on Saturday on Big Ten Network. The Huskers just got their first Big Ten win of the season over Penn State on Sunday. Their first Big Ten win in a long time. They're playing nearly every other day at this point, trying to make up for their cancellations from when they went on pause. Not a great Husker team. Purdue's first game against Nebraska was canceled. Was supposed to be at Mackey back in early January. Purdue would love to get that game made up. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but if you can get a chance to make up a game against one of the lower teams in the Big Ten, you'd take that every day. Transfer Teddy Allen has been pretty good for them at the guard spot. Nebraska's weird. They're hard to follow because of how transfer heavy the recruiting philosophy from Fred Hoiberg is. It's difficult to follow in a league that's kind of known for your guys who feel like they've been there forever. Your Yogi Ferrells, your Aaron Crafts, your Peter Jocks. You have these guys, Jordan Bohannon, Brad Davison, guys who have been at their schools for so long. Nebraska's not that type of a program. So it is a little interesting. They do play Maryland back-to-back on Tuesday and Wednesday in College Park before the Purdue game on Saturday. You would think fatigue is going to start setting in with this group pretty soon. Hoiberg's a good coach to lead this type of schedule. He's an NBA guy, coached with the Bulls for a while. He knows how to coach when you're playing so many games in so few days. But Purdue really ought to win this game. I think a loss at Nebraska for a second straight season would be really, really disappointing. Last year, a Christmas time game, Purdue goes to Pinnacle Bank Arena. Cam Mack has a triple-double. Purdue plays poorly. Matt Harms gets a concussion. And Purdue loses a game it really should have never lost. It's a winnable week for Purdue. Purdue could absolutely take both these games. I'm recording about an hour before the AP Top 25 will come out. I'd be surprised if Purdue is ranked after an 0-1 week. It's worth noting, though, Purdue was an underdog in the game at the Barn. I think people tend to forget that when looking at wins and losses. Purdue was a dog in that game. They weren't favored to win. They were favored to win in Mackey against Minnesota. They were not favored to win at the Barn. Vegas got both of those games right to a certain degree. It's a great time for Sasha Stefanovic to get back into form. It's really hard for a guy who is so dedicated to his shot to go 10 days without shooting a basketball in the middle of the season. Love to get him back in a game flow a little bit better. And Mason Gillis has to be on the floor for Purdue. He was a plus 11 at Minnesota, whereas Purdue was a minus 13 when he was not on the floor. Plus minus is a flawed stat, but to a certain degree, it's worth noting. And when it's a plus 11 with him on the floor, a minus 13 without him, that's important enough that it's worth noting. Keeping him out of foul trouble is huge. Couple thoughts on the Big Ten. Michigan is back from their COVID break, a come-from-behind win at Wisconsin yesterday. Starting to get a little disappointed in the Badgers. A senior-loaded team. They just keep on slipping in the Big Ten standings. I expected them to be better than this. Michigan did early on look like they hadn't played in a while. Isaiah Livers was excellent for them. Hunter Dickinson with 15 rebounds in that one. Incredibly effective. Absolutely neutralized Micah Potter and Nate Reavers down low. I don't know how Michigan can get every game made up. They had 5 games postponed. It won't be easy to do that, but the Wolverines are for real. Another team that's for real is Illinois. They have so much upside, so much talent on that team. They also have zero consistency. And that was noted again on Friday night when they needed overtime to beat Nebraska. In a game, Nebraska had the ball at the end of regulation with a chance to win it. There's so much talent. Ayo Dosunmu is a legitimate threat to Luka Garza in the Big Ten Player of the Year race. Garza will probably get it based off the name and his incumbency as Player of the Year. Dosunmu's legit. He is a week removed from a 32-point, 12-rebound, 12-assist game. But Illinois turns it over too much. They play out of control quite a bit. And that is what really scares you about the Illini as they go into March. If they can get that shored up, they're a serious threat. If they don't, they're a threat to lose in the first weekend. And it's that time of the year where we look at, will any coach be fired in the Big Ten? Richard Pitino was probably my top guess at the start of the year, but he's pieced together a pretty good group. As long as they don't fall out of the tournament, I think he'll be back, even though they did just have a disappointing loss at Maryland last night. Northwestern, a very young group, no seniors on that team. Chris Collins is the best coach in school history. Obviously, he's the only one to get them to the NCAA tournament. I think he'll be back. The season's been tough since the turn of the new year, but I do think he'll be back. And then Archie Miller is probably the most likely one at this point. The fourth-year coach down in Bloomington really can't seem to get ahead. It's one step forward, one step backward ever since he's arrived for the last 4 years. They were blown out on Saturday at Ohio State. Hoosier fans did not like that. I would still be surprised to see him fired. I think IU will make the tournament. They'd really have to fall apart here to not. It's hard to fire him if he makes it this year. New AD down there. He did not hire Archie Miller, although he was in the athletic department when the decision was made. Look, the game in West Lafayette next month means a ton for Archie Miller. 0 for 6 against Purdue. That is not a fan base that likes losing to Purdue. You've got Bob Knight with his legendary quote on that. If he can't beat Purdue this time around, you do have to really start wondering if there's going to be a move made. And then a quick thought on Purdue women's basketball. I know we don't talk about them much on the show. They're 6-11, 3-10 in Big Ten play. It looks like this is going to be the second losing season Purdue women's basketball has had since 1985. Both of those have come in the last decade over Sharon Versip. And it's disappointing how much the program has fallen. Fourth straight year missing the NCAA tournament, more than likely. Indiana has become a stronger program than Purdue. Back at the turn of the millennium, you couldn't have imagined that. 99 Purdue wins a national championship. 0-1 Purdue loses in the championship game. I would have to think there's change coming to the women's basketball program after this season. They have about a month left. Things don't look like they're getting much better. An 18-point loss at Rutgers yesterday made me decide to bring it up on the show. Disappointing stuff from the other team who plays in Mackey Arena. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for spending some time with me. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond for news and in-game analysis. Boilers and Beyond is available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I'll be back next Monday with a new episode to break down results from Michigan State and Nebraska. Until then, stay warm if you're in the Midwest and enjoy the best time of the year, the push for the NCAA tournament.